Welcome to Coffee with Craft.
Okay, so the episode title is a little clickbaity. I don't actually have Peter McKinnon on the podcast. That would be insane if I ever did have that dude on the podcast or any of the other people that I'm going to be talking about over the next few weeks. But I'm doing something a little different with the show over the next few weeks. And I'm talking about creatives that inspire me. And I'm looking at a couple different creatives. I'm looking at two guys and two girls. And one of the guys I'm looking at is Peter McKinnon. He is a filmmaker on YouTube and an editor and a photographer. He does a lot of really cool stuff. And recently he just released a video on his YouTube channel. It'll be linked in the description of this podcast called Just a YouTuber. If you're not savvy enough to figure out how to get from the podcast app to his YouTube channel, just go to YouTube and type Peter McKinnon, Just a YouTuber, and you'll find the 7-minute video that I'm going to play a clip of from you. And that part of this clip is what we are actually going to be talking about today on the show. But before I play that clip, I want to talk about the premise of this series. See, every one of us has people we look up to and we're inspired by. And a lot of people we're inspired by today, we don't know. Like, there are so many people I'm inspired by on the internet who I've never met or never even had a conversation with, who I've just absorbed their content and listened to it and taken a nugget from it and enjoyed it. This is true both in my creative life, my professional life, and my spiritual life. Like, there are so many people that you can listen to nowadays and never have a conversation with, but absorb so much wealth and information and knowledge from. And over the next few weeks, I want to look at the people who've inspired me as a creative, somebody who is pursuing and trying to become the best creative he possibly can be because he loves creating, and looking at the people who are inspiring me to be better and to figure out what it means to be more creative and be more intentional with the way I think and look at the world. And so that's what this whole series over the next few weeks is about, as we look at these 4 different creatives, and the first one being Peter McKinnon. And so his video, Just a YouTuber, has this really important thing that I want to talk about. So here's the clip.
Now, 2020 has been a hard and strange year for all of us. And for me, it's been a time to step back and evaluate what I want to do and what I want to accomplish. What's the goal? What's the point of any of this? And I don't think any of us are just anything, just YouTubers, just influencers, just kids with cameras. Anyone who's ever tried to make anything knows the struggle. It's a lot easier to criticize than it is to create. And if the goal here is to inspire, to move people, to make something that's worth a person's time, what makes any of us different from these so-called professionals? We're capable of so much more than what we give ourselves credit for.
Did you want to keep listening to the video? Did you want to just like hear what he had to say? Because like, I'm kind of mad that I cut that off, because man, I'll tell you what, I watched that video like 800 times. It's so good. It's a 7-minute video. Go on his channel and watch it. Watch the whole thing. There's some amazing stuff in there of cool camera shots and editing tricks that he did. It's super dope. I think you would love to watch the video if that teaser did anything for you. But there's a few things in that teaser that I want to specifically talk about. 4 ideas that were in that little minute clip that I think we can expand upon and find some stuff in today. And the first thing I want to talk about is the sentence he said: "We aren't just anything." So let me ask you this question. What box have you put yourself in, or what box have other people put you in? Because I loved, as he's talking there, that he talked about this idea that he doesn't think any of us are just anything. And that breaks down to this idea, as the video's title is Just a YouTuber, right? He's saying he's more than just a YouTuber, and he's saying you're more than just a creative. Like, that is like the heart behind a lot of this stuff that he's talking about here. But I want you to ask that question of yourself today. What boxes do you put yourself in? Or what boxes do other people put yourself in? I know for me, like, people put me in the box of I'm just a pastor. I'm just a youth pastor, right? Or put me in the box of I'm just a podcaster. Or put me in the box of I'm just a big, goofy dude, right? Like, people are willing and so easy to put ourselves in boxes, and we ourselves are so easy to put ourselves into a box and to limit ourselves. But what I love about this idea that Peter talks about, that we aren't just anything, is that it's so true, right? Like, we as human beings are complex creatures, right? We have complex minds, complex thoughts. We want to be a lot of things, and that is okay. I want that to be said more than anything. Like, it's okay to be complex, and it's okay not to just be one thing, but to be multiple things. I've had that tension in my life in a lot of areas of people thinking like, you're trying to do one thing and just be an influencer and not a pastor, when in the reality is, no, I'm a pastor who's creative, and creativity is an outlet for me to express myself and to have important and meaningful conversations. Or people who assume that I'm just a podcaster and not somebody who loves trying to make edits on movies and videos and take photos and figure out Lightroom and all that fun stuff, or that I'm just a writer. Like, before I did podcasting or video editing, I was a writer. And before that, I was a public speaker. Like, doing all of those things, I'm not just any one of those things. I'm so many different people, right? Like, I'm the same person who has a ton of facets about himself. And the same is said for you. No person is just a guitar player. No person is just an insurance salesman, right? No person just works at Amazon. I think of my brother-in-law Jordan when this quote is talked about. My brother-in-law Jordan is a warehouse worker at Amazon, and he's good at his job. He does a great job doing what he does. But he's not just a warehouse worker at Amazon. He's a husband. He's an expectant father. He is a woodworker. He loves creating things. He is a gamer. He loves getting on his video games and playing. He's creative. He loves playing D&D and entering into worlds full of stories. He loves card games. He plays Magic the Gathering like crazy. Like, he's super into nerd stuff. He's not just a warehouse worker. But how crazy is it, right? That we can look at people and put them in a box and say, you're just this. And we do that with other people, and we do that with ourselves. And it's a limiting viewpoint. We limit ourselves and we limit other people when we assume that they are just something. And what I would argue is we need to take that limiting view off of people around us and off ourselves, that we are not just something. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day when they brought up somebody who I had never heard of before. We went to the same college, but there was some overlap and they were grades below me, and we never interacted, me and this person, outside of maybe a coffee shop conversation or a hello. Not something meaningful and not something for me to remember them. But they remembered me and they knew of me, I guess. And man, there was this moment where my friend was talking to me and said, yeah, they made jokes about your podcast and that you post on TikTok and that you're doing all this stuff. And I remember hearing that and getting frustrated. And then I heard that quote from Peter that we're going to talk about now, this idea that it's easier to criticize than it is to create. And I've been creating since 2018 consistently. So I've been on this journey. It started with writing and the podcast. Yeah, wow. This has been a 3-year process, 2018, 2019, 2020. Like, we're entering into the 4th year. Like, that's insane to me that this is like, the podcast birthday is coming up in August, but like, we're finishing out year 3 right now of creating. And throughout the entire process that I've been creating, there's such truth to that idea that it is easier to criticize than it is to create. Everyone has an opinion on everything, right? But it's easier to criticize than it is to contribute or to do something to make something better. This isn't just true about creating, it's true about organizations and in life. It's easier to criticize your job than it is to help fix an organization. It's easier to criticize your country than it is to help be a part of the solution. It's easier to criticize something from far away than it is to enter into the conversation and see what you can do to be a part of it and help fix and make things better. It's easier to criticize than it is to create, or I would add onto it, it's easier to criticize than it is to contribute. And I loved that Peter said that because it's so true. And I know this is true not just in my life, but in the lives of other people. I have an Instagram DM from somebody, a friend, who was talking about how they felt like no one supported them in their idea of wanting to start and grow and make videos on YouTube and become a YouTuber. Like, this was this person's passion, and they started trying to figure it out, but they felt like they got nothing but criticism from their friends. And that broke my heart because while there's truth, like not everyone's good at everything, right? Like there's something to be said about that, right? But to have criticism be the first response that we do, instead of contributing and trying to help and trying to make things better and entering into someone's story, like that is so whack on so many levels, right? Like, how would you feel like if you become passionate about something and everyone punches you in the face? Right? Like it destroys you. It makes you feel like inferior and not good enough, right? And so I think back to the moments that I've had where people have criticized when I have created, or people who haven't understood what I've created, or even people who I talk to who are criticized for what they're creating or what they're pursuing, right? It's not even just creativity, right? Like, it's easier to critique somebody who's going to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning than it is to contribute to helping them out. Or it's easier to criticize somebody who is trying to learn a new skill like guitar, even though they've never played an instrument in the day of their lives, than it is to contribute to them and be encouraging to them, right? Like, it's so much easier to criticize than it is to contribute. It's easy in our jobs, right? Like, any person who's had a job for any period of time can tell you it's so much easier to criticize than it is to be a part of a solution. It's so much easier. It's so much easier to go, no one gets it, they just don't understand, they're stuck in their ways. Like, it's so much easier to say that than it is to step in and be a part of solutions. And I'll be honest with you, like, for the last 2 years before I entered into my new job, I was a part of an organization where that was a tension for me. Straight up, it was a tension for me before I entered into my new job. Thankfully, it's not a tension at my new job, right? But like at my old job, straight up, like, it was a tension for me to just want to criticize and not contribute. And I had to actively combat against criticizing to going to contribute, to not just saying this sucks, to saying I'm going to help make this better, right? And that's hard. It's not something that you can just easily do and a switch you can just easily make, right? But if we move from critiquing to contributing, it leads to a much better story. There are so many people who have contributed to me. So many people. A lot of you are listening to this show right now. My audience, you are contributors to this thing. Coffee with Craft wouldn't exist if people didn't keep coming back. If the view count showed 0 for weeks in a row, I'd stop. Right? Like, this wouldn't be a thing anymore. But it doesn't. It shows 30, 50, hundreds, 200s. Like, that's awesome, right? People contribute and love and engage with what I'm doing. And because of that, I keep showing back up. And so we have to contribute and not just criticize. Because, yeah, it's easier to criticize than it is to create. It's easier to criticize than it is to contribute. But man, life is so much better when we contribute to a problem, to someone being creative, to our organizations, than it is just to criticize and be a Debbie Downer. This next part is for anyone who creates, anyone who is creative in some capacity. in their life for other people. And it's the quote that he said, if our goal is to inspire and to create something worth someone's time. And that hit me personally. And this is where I'm going to be a little more introspective in this episode instead of just giving anecdotal examples about me and other people. This is purely like anecdotal on me in this part, but it involves you, the listener, as well. My goal of the show is to inspire conversation. Like Coffee with Craft is a show that is dedicated to inspire conversation and have meaningful, in-depth conversations like you would in a coffee shop. I've tried to do that on this show consistently for a while. And I'm figuring out what maybe conversation could look like differently for a while I'm in this new season of figuring out starting the new job and working out and getting healthier and trying to figure out how to work creativity into that. But I need to work creativity into that for my own mental sanity. But the goal of Coffee with Craft is to inspire conversation and for it to be worth someone's time. There's so many people who create just to create and to throw stuff out there into the wind to get views and likes and clicks and all of that fun stuff. And I'll admit, I've fallen into that trap more times than not. But I don't just want views and clicks and listens on my show or my videos or anything I do. I want to inspire people to step into story. Like to step into listening to other people's story, to sharing their story, and to helping others share their story. Because my life changed when I started to share my story. Like straight up, my life in 2018 changed when I realized my story had power and value and that I could share it. And I began to firmly believe that. Like I was able to let that out, and it has birthed a whole new Eric in the past 3 years. And I'm thankful for that. I'm so thankful for that. But the goal, right, is to inspire other people to do that. Not just to keep sharing my story, because if I did, that would be super lame. You know what I did today? I woke up at 4 a.m. I took some pre-workout. I went to the gym. I then had some coffee and worked all day. That was my day. I had dinner with my mom. Did that today, right? If I was just sharing that, that's kind of lame, kind of boring. No one cares about it, right? But that's why I started to realize that it's not just sharing my story and sharing the hard things and the good things. It's sharing the meaningful things and helping others share their meaningful things, right? That's why we did interviews all throughout things, right? Because we're helping other people share their meaningful things and have conversation. And that's why we're even doing this series where we're taking an in-depth look at the creatives that have inspired me, right? Because they have shared meaningful things that I want to share in with you, right? And hopefully inspire not just me, but you as well, right? Hopefully there's a nugget of inspiration here that is worth your time, that makes you think differently, that makes you want something new or different, right? Our goal is to inspire. If we're creating, our goal is to inspire somebody, for it to be worth their time. And I hope that about each and every podcast episode I record, there have been a ton of podcast episodes that haven't happened. Tons that I could release that are on my hard drive right now. Literally probably 20 that I've never released because I don't believe they're worth time. I believe they're bad, and I don't think they're of anyone's value. And there's times where I've had to say to a guest hey, sorry, this just didn't work out, and then we went a different direction. Because I listened to the episode, whether it was my end or a guest end or whatever, it wasn't it didn't have the oomph to inspire or motivate, or wasn't a meaningful conversation. And so my hope is, right, I'm creating those meaningful moments, not just getting views, likes, and clicks. And so while there was a clickbaity title on this, right, and we're dissecting a YouTube video probably more than a YouTube video needs to be dissected, the goal is to inspire. Right? It's not just to be let's get some likes and listens today, right? It's to legitimately inspire and create something meaningful. And my hope for you, if you're a creative of any sort, or even just in the way you live your life, is that you live your life in a way that is inspiring to others, that is meaningful to others. Because at the end of the day, a life that is meaningful to others is a life well lived, I think. Like a life that shows like other people have value and helps other people share their stories and helps other people take next steps and all of those fun things. Like that's a life that has value and meaning. And so my hope for you is that you strive to that goal as well. That the goal is to inspire and to do something worth the time of other people and truly worth your time. Not just to get other people to go, oh, hey, that's cool. And we're ending today with the last quote of that clip. You are capable of so much more. And that quote to me was just inspiring. It reminds me that I, as a person, can keep going. I, as a person, can push to new limits. I, as a person, can grow and become better. And I hear that quote, that's the thing it gives off in me. And I wanted to end the show today as we look at this idea of we aren't just anything, and it's easier to criticize than it is to create, and that the goal is to make something worth the time of other people. On this note of encouragement that we find at the end of this clip, that you are indeed capable of so much more than you do give yourself credit for. I think it's easy for us to be our own biggest critic and our own biggest loud limiting voice in our head that says you suck and you aren't good enough and you can't do this. And for the sake of not turning this into a motivational podcast, I want to end on this note of just pure encouragement for you. That you are not just insert the blank. You are a human being who is complex, who is full of interest, who is full of amazing thoughts and ideas, and you are capable of so much more than you give yourself credit for. And so push yourself a little harder. Seek people who aren't just going to criticize you, but contribute with you into something. And inspire others with what you are doing. Because that's what we learned in this little short minute clip that we talked about today for 22 minutes. Wow, that's insane. But that's my hope today, is that you walk away realizing you are capable of a little bit more. And so that's my hope for you. Hey, I hope you go and you check out Peter's YouTube channel, especially if you're into photography or video editing. It's a really dope channel. He also just has some really cool stories on there. So go and check it out. He's super awesome and cool. Wish I could meet that guy in person because we have a mutual love of coffee and a mutual love of Ford cars. He drives a Ford Raptor. I drive a Ford Focus. There's nothing wrong with Ford Focuses. Get over it if you have a problem. But joking aside, go check out his stuff. It's really, really cool. And man, my hope for you this week as you head into this next week is that you live with that idea that you aren't just anything and that you can be so much more, and that you step into that. When we step into that and we push ourselves, there's a cool story on the other end. So that's my hope for you. Hey, I appreciate you coming back and grabbing a cup of coffee on the Coffee with Craft podcast. I hope you enjoyed this different format. Don't worry if you don't like it. There's only 3 more episodes of this. We're going to be back to interviews here soon. I'm working on lining some cool stuff up, but I really want to talk about the creatives that inspired me and have pushed me and have kept me going when a lot of other things didn't keep me going. And so I'm going to talk about a couple more creatives over the next few weeks that I'm super excited about. And so next week, we're going to dive into another creative and it'll be super fun. And so I hope you come back next week. Hope you grab a cup of coffee and you pull up a chair and you sit down and you engage in a story with me on the Coffee with Craft podcast. See you next week.